as I said earlier, whole fish has a tendency to kind of freak people out a little bit, only because, well, for me anyway, I think it's the size of it. What we're going to do with this salmon, and this is a gorgeous salmon. This is a wild salmon known as a Chinook. This is off the Columbia River, which is, for me, you can't get much more local than that, 20 miles upstream here, so to speak. Let's talk about quality. First thing you want to do, and I'm going to put some gloves on, and you may have noticed from time to time in this video that I wear gloves. I wear gloves for a couple reasons. Just one of those extra steps I like to do to make sure that when I'm dealing with potentially hazardous foods, and seafood being one of those, that I protect the fish and protect my hands as well. With fish, when you receive it, if you're receiving whole fish, you want to make sure you have plenty of ice around the fish, on top of the fish, and equally as important, inside the cavity of the fish, as you can see this one has. Now, if it comes with packed ice, what you want to do is you want to leave the ice that is packed in, but you want to get it out of the container that it came in. And for us, that means with a fish like this, I can put it in, and you can imagine the size of this container, a large vessel that has holes in it, and then a deeper vessel to hold the fish. That's what we call a self-draining container. So as the ice melts, it doesn't stay in contact with the fish. That's probably worse than not even icing the fish at all. So lots of ice, draining container. Now, when you receive whole fish, and don't be intimidated by the size of the salmon. This is about a 15-pound fish, but if you're doing whole trout or any whole small fish, you want to treat it all the same way. What you're looking for, and which is why I buy head-on whole fish, is it gives me an opportunity to look at the eyes of the fish. And the eyes should be clear, they should be bulging, as you would expect, but I should be able to see, as they say, the whites of their eyes. But I want to make sure that it's clear. The other things I look for is inside the mouth, the tongue should be fairly tight. And at this point, if I'm freaking anybody out, I do apologize, but that's all part of what we're eating. And you want to take care of what you're eating, Treat it with respect. We follow a sustainable approach here at the cooking school, which means that we only buy locally, as much as possible at least. And when we do that, we really want to think about how the product was handled before it even came to us. And that's another also indicator of quality. So let's talk about that. If you look at the skin of this fish, a couple things come into mind. You see some strap marks, if you will, over the belly of the fish. Now, this came to us troll caught, and troll caught means that there were many, many lines from the fishermen in the water with many hooks that were baited. This fish didn't look like it went through a lot of trauma as it was caught, but it looks like as it was brought on board, it may have been handled, I don't want to say inappropriately, but handled a little bit more than maybe it should have been, leaving marks in the fish. And those are actually indentations in color. That happened before the fish died. The other thing I can tell by this fish is there's a slit in its gill. Now that actually either happened from a gaffled hook when they tried to bring the fish on board. It also may have happened in the wild, because now that I look at this, it looks like it was a cut that healed. So I'm going to assume this happened in the wild. It didn't seem to impact the quality of the fish. If it did impact the quality of the fish, we call that trauma, and that would be something I would see on the inside of the belly. That would be a discoloration, which this fish doesn't seem to have any of that discoloration. Fresh to me is sent to me within 24 hours. Fresh to you at the store may not mean within 24 hours, but fish has a good 3 to 5 day shelf life on ice if it's handled properly. You can actually go a lot longer, but if you're buying for quote-unquote fresh fish, if fish is more than 3 to 5 days old, you might as well buy frozen, because it was frozen when caught. And that's also not a bad thing to go with. Okay, let's see if we've got all this nailed down then. Clear, bulging eyes. Firm tongue inside the mouth. Of course, be careful when you put your hand in there, because they do have sharp teeth. Nice red gills. Now, we didn't talk about gills too much, and by law these days, gills need to be removed from the fish, part of a food safety thing. But what you can see inside the fish, hopefully we can get that on camera, is where the gills were, and that's still pretty vibrant and red, including in the cavity here, the bloodline from the intestines that were removed are still pretty red. So this is a nice fish. The other thing I'm looking for is I'm lightly touching the flesh of the fish, and it's firm. Now, sometimes during the year, this fish flesh isn't going to be as firm, and it's not an indication of quality as much as the time of the year. Let me explain. Atlantic salmon and Pacific salmon all have the same migratory patterns, and what that means is once they spend their first year of their life in the waters they're from, they then go to the open ocean. So it's the only species that I'm aware of that lives in both freshwater and saltwater. So it swims downstream to the ocean, where it spends pretty much the rest of its life. When it wants to spawn and lay its eggs and mate, if you will, it swims back upstream to where it spent that first year of life. I don't think scientists still understand how it's able to do that, but most people people believe it's through sense of smell, and that's pretty much what they do. So they get back to their point of origin and they spawn. Now, before they do that, they eat a lot of food, and they're big. And at the beginning of that migratory path, they're pretty huge, and the meat flesh is fairly firm. But as they get closer to their spawning grounds, they have used a lot of energy to go upstream, as you can imagine, going against the currents. And as they use up that energy, aka fat in the fish, it gets a lot leaner and it gets a lot softer. And so that's more of an indication of where it was caught more than the quality of the fish. To break down a fish, I really have to revert back to another chapter where we talked about the tools of the trade, or the culinary wardrobe. You really need a sharp knife here, because without a sharp knife, you're going to literally butcher the fish. And I can assure you that this is not where the term came from. You want to do a good job in fabricating this animal, so the first thing we want to do is make sure we have a knife that is going to be as long as the animal is wide. So as you can see, as I run my knife down, that means that when I actually get down to my fillets and I have to skin the product, I want to make sure that I'm not going to be stuck midstream. So this is a pretty good knife, long knife, heavy-handled knife. I also have a longer knife that's equally as sharp, and which we're going to hone in a moment, but also will do the job for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife, and on a 25-degree angle, I'm going to go from the end of the blade to the toe. We call this the heel, this is the toe. So from heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe, heel to toe. And really, look, what I'm looking to do is 3 swipes should do it. I'm not sharpening the knife, I'm honing the blade. Big difference here. And what this is going to do is to ensure me, if I do this before and after each use, that I'm always working and maintaining a sharp knife. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put my other glove back on. And I shouldn't say back on. These are new gloves I've put on. You always want to use these only once. And this is just like a tool, and you're covering your hands, so you want to make sure your hands are always clean before you put the gloves on. Now, a couple key points here. There will be some waste on this fish when we're done, and we're going to talk about how we utilize that waste. So we're going to try to make there be very little waste, just sub-products that we're going to use for different purposes. To cut into my fish, what I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and cut just below the fin here and to the top of the head, because I want to get a nice clean cut. Since I am looking to make fillets, pardon me, since I am looking to make fillets, I'm going to go ahead and actually come in under the fin and work my way down the back spine of the fish. If I wanted to make steaks, I would actually start immediately by making a straight cut all the way down and through the backbone, giving me actually pieces of the fillet on both sides of the bone. Very similar to a T-bone steak in many regards. But since we're doing fillets, let me kind of walk you through how we go through this process. Number one, as I said, we're going to come in and we're going to make our first cut, holding the belly up so I don't cut through the second half of the fish. I'm cutting down and through. Now, I'm going to pick my hand up off this blade. I'm going to come in at a slight angle so that I maximize how much fish I end up with my fillet. And as you can see, I'm exposing a good portion of the belly. And I'm going to let my knife do the work, and since it's sharp, I'm confident that when it stops, it's stopping on bone. And what it's doing is it's stopping on the back spine of the fish. So now I'm going to start to slice at a slight 45-degree angle to release the fish from the back spine. And I am cutting. Now notice, as I'm cutting slowly because I don't want to jerk my knife and hit my hand. I'm keeping the belly open, and I'm making sure the knife doesn't touch the belly, and I'm maintaining that angle. And as I cut down through the back of the belly, or the bottom of the belly as you would say, I'm going to come through this center fin, and I'm going to exit at the tail. Now I want to make sure I'm working smart too, so I'm going to move my fish forward so that the tail is resting snugly on my cutting board. And again, I'm moving up the belly and through the back of the tail. Now, if I've done this right, we're going to have a nice clean fillet, so let's see what we have. That looks pretty clean. Now, for me, it doesn't get much better than this. Now, as you look at this, you're going to see we have some leftover meat here. Now, in a professional restaurant, this isn't a concern at all, because what you have here is very usable for chowders, for smoking, for omelets, for a myriad of uses. For the home cook, same type of thing. You don't want to throw this out. I'm going to show you an easy way to get this meat off the bone. You just want to take another knife, and I'm going to just cut on the bone that's left, and you can see I have little bits of scrap material. And it's better to do this and easier to do this before you take the other fillet off. And I'm not dealing with a lot of excess, but enough that I don't want to lose it. And I'm probably going to end up, I think when all is said and done, with maybe 3 or 4 ounces of meat that's going to have what I call a secondary use. And let's just look at the color of this fish. Just kind of go back here for a moment. This is beautiful. I wouldn't call this red. You're going to see that more in the Atlantic, excuse me, and then the Atlantic salmon, of course, but also in the salmon that you'd catch probably later in the year. All right, so to recap, we've taken one fillet off the side of the salmon. The second fillet comes off equally as easy, but again, you want to take your time. That's really the key. And as you saw, the right tool for the job, a knife that is as long as the fish is wide. That being said, I'm going to go ahead and switch now to what I like to call my boning knife. It's really more of a utility knife, but as you see, it has an offset blade. This is part of the Kershaw Shun line, and I like this because it has a hollow-handled handle, so it's a lot lighter in my hand. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by removing some of that belly, and let me show you. It makes a lot more sense to you. The belly has a series of bones that are a lot easier to get out than the bones we're going to be taking off in a moment. And what I want to do is come from the center section forward, and I want to release using the knife towards me. I'm just coming in just literally just underneath this white matter that you're seeing on tape, and I'm releasing those large bones. And I'm not cutting deeply into the fish at all. And you'll see in a moment how much it's shaved in reality. And I'm going to just do that same thing slowly so that I don't damage this incredible belly. And one more time, I can come in underneath. And that looks great. It's hard for you to see what it's looking like because I'm looking pretty closely to it. All right, now it becomes like a razor, and that's again making sure you have a sharp knife. I'm just shaving the meat off the bone, and I'm going to turn the fish to make it a little more user-friendly for me since I'm doing the cutting, and I think you might be able to get a glance of what's happening inside the fish. And I'm shaving it, and I can almost see the knife through the skin of the fish. As you can see, it's nice. Now this is where you start to see where the fish was beginning to migrate up. I'm seeing some of the meat breaking, as you can see right here. Again, that's not a quality issue. That's very natural in salmon. And we're going to see a lot more of those breaks once I start to remove some of the bones. Okay, so we have a nice clean fillet, and I'm going to cut right below, kind of show you here one more time. I'm going to cut right below the inside of the belly. Now this is good meat. This is going to be great eating. But what I want to do is, it's not going to work for me because I'm thinking about what I'm using as my final product, and I'm looking for fillets. Fillets, or block cut as we call them. One of the keys here is that each of those pieces are fairly uniform in size, because if they're not, if there's thinner pieces and thicker pieces in one fillet, then you'll have uneven cooking. And so what I like to do here at the school is I like to cut this belly off, and when I smoke my fish for later use, this will be some of the stuff that I smoke for my chowders. So I'm going to open up that little piece of belly that we created, and I'm going to take my knife and just cut through. And as I come up to that fin, I'm cutting through it as well. And again, clean knife, sharp knife, does the job. Hopefully in one take, but sometimes that skin can be a little less forgiving. But you always want to work within the parameters that you created. Now I'm also going to keep the bones intact here because there's some meat attached that when you're smoking are going to have a lot of extra flavor. So this is what I would consider secondary use meat. I'm going to put my other little meat that we scraped off the skeletal area earlier here. And so combined I have about 6 ounces of meat. And it's not waste material for me because I'm going to use it to smoke, as I said, and it'll go into our house chowder. Okay, now what I've got left is some pretty good looking fish. I'm going to go ahead to the center where the spine was, and I'm just going to remove some of this cartilage material. And once you make a little cut into the fish, you can just kind of cut down the center. You can also make a slight slice on both sides of the center to help release that as well. And as you can see, then you just kind of take your knife up here, come up underneath, and it should fall off fairly easily. And that little indentation is pretty common that you've created, and there's no easy way around it because this is not something you want to eat. This is as bad as eating bones on the fish. And again, none of this gets thrown out in my house. We like to smoke it all and use it in our secondary product. I'm just going to clean up the center here, and we are good to go. All right, looking pretty good so far. Now this tail meat, I'm going to go ahead and make that slice, but I'm not going to remove it. Now here's why. Here's why I'm not going to remove that tail meat. It's important when you're smoking the fish to have some product that is going to be very fatty and some product that's going to be very flaky. In contrast to that, when you're serving fillets, you want to have all very gentle, delicate meat-eating fish. And when I say meat-eating, I mean obviously what you're going to consume. So the center portion of the salmon is really what we call our primal cut, or our prime cut of fish. This part is going to be tougher because as the fish swims, that's what's doing all the motion, and that's why that's a little bit tougher. So when I skin this, this will become my smoked product. Now, to skin the fish, you want to make sure that you first removed all the bones. So I'm going to start with a pair of needle nose pliers. Now, these are actually culinary needle nose pliers. The only difference here is that these are stainless steel, so they can pass the rigor of going into a dish machine ongoing. And what I'm looking for is I'm feeling the fish for those, what we call pin bones. And on the belly side, I shouldn't feel any because I removed those bones right here. As I go down the center, again, I shouldn't feel any. It's on the back side of the fish that I begin to feel the bones. And if you look closely, see if we can get that, you'll see little indentations throughout the fish. Those are where I cut against the skeletal tissue, and that's where those pin bones live. And I'm just going to come halfway down to show you the first one. Now, the pin bones come in at a sharp angle, and so you want to remove them using that same sharp angle. And that's one pin bone. I like to gather them down as we go. Show you a couple more. They pop out fairly easily, but when you do them, you want to get a nice tight grip on the bone and then pull away from you. So I'm pulling out and away, and that's how the bone is in the animal. To fillet the fish, we first must skin it. Now, I'm not sure if you can see it on the board, but there are some scales that are coming off. Keep in mind, when whole fish comes in, it has already been descaled. They actually scrape them at sea before offloading them to shore. And they also continue that process during fabrication. What you're going to want to do when we're done is we're going to want to wash our fillets so that we have a clean piece of fish before we actually cook it. To do actually skinning, one of the things that, and I'm going to kind of digress a moment, because growing up on the East Coast, it just seems like there's somewhere in the Midwest something happened and people on the West Coast don't seem to like their fish with skin on. People on the East Coast only like their fish with the skin on. So I grew up eating lake perch with the skin on, and I was amazed the first time I had salmon out here and the skin was removed. So you don't have to go through this exercise to cut the fillets, but if you don't like the skin, this is a good way to go. What I'm going to do is taking that knife, and again, keep in mind the knife should be at least as long as the fish is wide. I'm going to start with the tail section, and I'm going to make, I'm going to call that about a 45-degree angle, and I've made an incision. Now, I'm not worried about that little bit of fatty tissue I've left. What I have here, let me move this so we don't have glare. What I have here is something to hold on to as I work my way up the fish. And what I'm looking to do is not cut through the skin, but I am cutting through the meat. And what I can do is stop in a moment, take a look, and I can see that I'm not leaving any meat on the skin, and I've got a nice clean cut. As I go further up the fish, I'm going to move that fish back a little bit so I'm not working too hard. And again, I've got a sharp knife, so the knife is doing really all the work. Again, check it out, looking pretty good. Come back. And I'm gripping the fish more up. As I go, I'm gripping the skin that's left on the board. I'm kind of working my hand up the fish as well to make sure that I don't inadvertently miss and cut through the skin. If that means I sacrifice a little meat, then we'll see if that happens. Okay, so put my knife down. I'm going to turn my fish over. And it looks pretty darn clean. And as you can see, I've not really left any meat on the skin. Now, if I'm smoking, I might want to hang on to this. Otherwise, there's not a lot of use for this. So I'm going to go ahead and just fold that over. And we'll put it with our scrap. We're going to assess the look of the fillet. And you can see a couple spots where I stopped. And that would not normally happen if I'm just cutting the fillet or cutting the fish directly. But as I always instruct my staff, when you're cutting fish, you want to cut all the way through. When you pause to stop and talk, this is where I paused on video to talk to you. It didn't hurt the fish at all, but that clean motion is what you're looking for to prep the fish. I can see I have a little bit of skin left on the collar of the fish. Not a big deal. Comes right off. Okay, now this fish is ready to be fabricated into its final form. Again, this is a good looking fish, as you can see. As I told you earlier, I'm not going to go ahead and take that little connective tissue or that cartilage off the tail. I'm going to go ahead and cut that cleanly. I do that because this will be my smoked fish. I like to leave it intact. Now, I've got options. Let me move this so it's a little more user-friendly for you. You can see the belly section here in the front, and this is the back section. What I like to do is when I cut my fillets, I'm going to cut through the back directly, down and clean, separating the two pieces of meat. Now, the reason I do that is if I left this hole, let's kind of put this back together for camera's sake, if I left this hole and started cutting my fillets, you can see that this is a lot thinner and this is a lot thicker. This is what would be uneven cooking in the final stages. So by separating it, I have the best of both worlds. This will cook at a certain time and temperature, and this will cook a certain time and temperature. With these pieces, I can go a myriad of ways. So let me show you a couple what I like to call bias cuts. I'm going to come in at a sharp bias. And that's a nice piece of fish that looks to me about 2.5, 3 ounces. I'm going to come in with a second bias cut. And you can see almost immediately what I'm doing here is not only getting a nice big piece of meat, this is about 4 ounces of fish, but that's going to give me plate coverage, plate presentation. One more cut just to make sure we all got it. And again, I've got a sharp, I think I'd call that about a 45-degree angle, cut on the fish. And again, we have a 2.5 to 3 ounces. We'll move our scraps over here. And let's make room for our good quality product. And if this first piece ends up being a little bit too small, throw it in with the smoking fish. It's not going to be wasted. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and score that off so I can show you what a block cut looks like. In a block cut, what we're literally trying to do is create a block. It's just one more way for plate presentation. So for a block cut, instead of going bias, I'm going straight up and down. And it may not look like much now, but on its side, that is truly a block cut. And again, that gives you height and depth on the plate. And because we're promoting, at least here at the Cooking School, everything in moderation, let me kind of take a step back and discuss that. We've got incredible quality fish. This is within 24 hours of catch. You don't have to do a lot to this fish. As a matter of fact, when we prepare this later in our segment, I'm going to quickly saute this with a little bit of salt, pepper, and of course some coriander and extra virgin olive oil. And then we're going to eat it. And it's great because it's simple. And when food is simple and bold flavors are pronounced, you don't need a lot. So we're looking at no more than 4 ounces. And quite frankly, in the American diet, 4 ounces is plenty of protein at any given meal.